The reason I came to the house was I was accustomed to residential living on campus, but when I graduated, I moved out and decided that I needed to strike out on my own. So I lived in a flat briefly and cooked for myself, but I'm terrible at cooking. So I found that IH was offering a meal program for non-residents, which encouraged more mixing with locals and the residents. So I signed up for that, and then I found that walking in was quite a bit of a chore for every meal, so I thought, well, why not take up residence here? So that's what I did. So at Sydney University, as an undergraduate, I studied pure mathematics and physics with the hope of becoming a theoretical physicist. But around that time, computing was starting to catch on. We had a couple of computers at the department, and also I'd built my own little computer. So I had found that such an interesting subject that it pulled me away from physics, and I got sucked into computer science. And so I studied that first of all as a master's student at Sydney, and then as a PhD student at Berkeley and at Stanford in the US. When I reached retirement age at Stanford University, I became emeritus. These days I go around to various universities, talk there. I'm still doing research, and I have presented work at new areas. In fact, I've gotten interested in climate recently, so I've started writing material for climate conferences. Back in the 1960s, we Australians had relatively little contact with the outside world. I had never traveled to other countries besides New Guinea, and I had very little experience of the values and culture and habits of people from other countries. So it was quite an eye-opener to suddenly live in a house where half the residents were from countries that thought quite differently from Australians and had very different ideas of the world and politics and so on. One of my fondest memories of the house is when I sang in the wool room. This was at the occasion of one of the first marriages. In fact, it may have been the first marriage in the house, which was held in the wool room. I got to sing a piece out of Carmina Burana, Omnia Sol Temperat, which is probably the least racy part of Carmina Burana, a very racy bit by Carl Orff written in the 1940s. Without a doubt, the most memorable experience I had was meeting my wife. She's been with me now for getting close to 50 years, and I think that definitely had an obvious impact on my life. Living in International House and meeting with the overseas residents allowed me, when I did start traveling overseas, when I became a professor, to interact with people overseas in a more comfortable way than I might have at the beginning if I had not had that experience. Yeah, so it continues to be as relevant today, the mission of International House, as it was 40 years ago. One difference is that the world is a lot more connected, but even so, if you live day to day with overseas people, that's different from simply seeing them on television and on the internet.